Her first professional gig as an actor and model was as a runaway slave, and she got paid dollars for that. Will was a guy who would be comfortable in the hood or the White House and everywhere in between. He had the ability to spread his arms wide and promise you that the world was his oyster and he was going to give you all the pearls it had to offer. I'll try to keep this kind of light but also informative because I know how the Smiths feel about jokes being made at their expense.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth!
Worthy by Miss Jada Pinkette Smith. Here's the thing. I know that Miss Jada Pinkette Smith is not really well liked right now. And I know that a lot of people are having a lot to say about her, which is why I know a lot of people want to know what the heck is in this book. But a lot of people are not willing to do the time in reading what the heck is in this book. So this is why I will read it and report back. Personally, I'm not a big Jada Pinkette Smith fan. I'm not even a Jada Pinkette Smith fan, period. The only thing that I really know about Jada is that she has Red Table Talk with her family. We got to know about like their whole marital issues through Red Table Talk. I know that she's married to Will Smith. So I kind of feel like my lack of knowledge on Jada's history, besides what's in the news right now, will help me be more non-biased as to like the information I'm going to be relaying to you as to what the heck is in this book, because I have no like in the game. I have like no reason to give you a biased review because I'm not a fan of her. I barely know much about her. I just know what's been circulating in the news. You know what I mean? So we'll see if it is worthy. 400 pages later. Yeah. This book was an emotional roller coaster.
Just a roller coaster. Emotional for Jada, but not really the reader.
I just want to say at the extremely sensitive topics, I will not be making jokes. I will take this serious because in the beginning, the book starts off with Jada talking about how she had suicidal ideation in her 40s. And that's something that needs to be taken seriously. I don't think that anybody deserves to feel that way at all. And it does give kind of like a perspective into the book about her life kind of leading up to that moment of like, how come you became like, you know, a very successful woman, a very well-known woman, and at 40 you're having suicidal ideation. And she describes how she wanted to kill herself in a way that didn't look incredibly obvious to her children so that it could look like an accident, and that is something that needs to be dealt with a lot of empathy. So I do have a lot of empathy for her. I do want to say there are a lot of moments in this book where sometimes I have a lot of empathy for her, sometimes I really am sad for her, but just to keep it very real, there are some moments where I'm like, oh my god, you're such an only child. This is such only children energy, only child energy. And then there are some moments where I'm like, sometimes I feel like I see her, but overall I do have an understanding, and I do think this book is worthy of attention, is worthy of coming to like you understanding her. So this book is split up into 4 parts, and I'm just gonna be honest, the first 2 parts are a lot more real and honest. Well, not honest because I can't call her a liar. I don't know any of these events happening. A lot more vulnerable and direct, and like feel like a person is having a straight up conversation with you and educating you on like themselves, versus the last 2 parts are kind of like, oh, some of these just feel like, you know, when a person is talking and they're talking in like Shakespearean quotes, like they're like, it's almost like they're coming off fake deep. A lot of the last parts of the book I'm like, this is so fake deep, and she has like little periods of in between the chapters where it's like, this is like a little too preachy for me. Like, I don't really want to learn specifically from you about like some of these things that you're like trying to like teach, you know. Anyway, so the book is split into, like I said, 4 parts. First part is her childhood. It's titled Childhood, the Orphan, which she wasn't really an orphan, but she did grow up with 2 addicts, which I mean, like, in itself, like, is kind of like, you do have a high level of abandonment and orphan themes. So part 2 is Hollywood. Part 3 is Ride or Die, which and then part 4 is The Exiled Islands, where she talks about kind of like the so we'll get into it. The first part of Worthy kind of dives into Jada's childhood trauma And Jada was born in Baltimore, kind of like born and raised in Baltimore up until she went off to college. I mean, like she had some stints in California with like some of her let me not get ahead of myself. So she was born to a very young mother, Adrienne. If you watch Red Table Talks, you know who she is. Adrienne looks good, okay? She looks really good for her age. I will say the genes are phenomenal in that family. Let's just be for real. But I mean, like, she had her at 17, so of course she's gonna be looking good as a mother. Like, so Adrienne has her at like 17, and then her father's also like, I think the same age, if not the same age, extremely close. And they both are extremely young, not really, like, Jada was an accident. From there, like, having a child, in Adrienne's mind, she's like, well, I gotta get married to him because we have a child. And that's just kind of like the way that family dynamics, I guess, worked back then, is like, once you get pregnant, like, you're married. We learn a little bit about Jada and Jada's grandparent on her mother's side. Adrienne's mom had her when she was like 14, something like really young. Or her grandmother, Jada's grandmother, described, well, would always tell her, like, don't like let a man like take over your life. Like, the way that Adrienne was conceived was like out of ignorance, basically. Like, I didn't have sex education. I don't want you to ever like depend on a man the way that like I have to, like your mother has to. Also, Miss Adrienne, Jada's mom, got a divorce like a year later after they attempted a marriage. Adrienne was a drug addict, same as Adrienne's partner, Jada's dad. I don't know why I said Adrienne's partner. Rob Soul Pinkett. It's also interesting that Jada refers to her dad as Rob Soul. Like, she'll call him dad every once in a while, but it's like that's who he is to her, which is very fascinating. She has her grandparents on her father's side who are also alcoholics. Childhood is kind of a strong indicator as to how a child will turn out. A child's behavior is kind of reflected off of the adults around them. So let's just be honest, when I'm not trying to excuse it, but the way that Jada and her behavior like kind of is, not only in her marriage but like growing up, and especially through reading the book, I have a lot of understanding about where she's coming from, because her upbringing is not like desirable. For one, being an only child, yikes. In terms of like the marital examples, in terms of like the relationships she's seen growing up as examples, were not good examples. So it would be kind of a miracle if Jada just kind of had this traditional marriage that was like extremely healthy and like long lasting, because she didn't grow up with that necessarily. And like you can't mold somebody into that. I don't hate only children. I just kind of feel like being an only child is an indicator of something demonic. So Jada gets into a decent amount of fights at school. We don't really know why. I don't know. Honestly, I think she's just a badass little kid. I think she just is allowed to do a lot of bad little things, especially because she is an only child raised by drug addicts. We love Adrienne now. She's great. Just detailing like a fight back to her aunt Karen. And Karen says to Jada, don't come up in here tell me about some girl pulling your hair. Somebody touches you, make sure they don't do it again. And that is where Jada's aunt manifested alopecia for her. I'm canceled immediately, and I apologize immediately. One of the little, like, bad behaviors that she has, it's kind of funny. Like, there's some moments in this book where I'm like, this is low-key, like, very hilarious, the way that she just grew up. In, like, I think it was around either middle school or high school, Jada wants to go visit one of her friends in New York, and she, like, lies to her mom and says that she's going on a field trip. And her mom's like, okay, totally cool. The school calls her mom, being like, hey, Jada's absent today. And then Adrienne is like, yeah, she's on the field trip. Like, what the heck? And and the school's like, what field trip? And she's like, this specific field trip. And she's like, the school is like, that field trip doesn't exist. And Adrienne gets pissed. If you have the ability, give your children siblings, please. What's also interesting about her childhood is that I didn't realize that she met Tupac when she was in 10th grade. Everybody's talking about her and Tupac's relationship like as if they just all of a sudden were like fake close, and like she's just bringing it up out of nowhere, and like they were not as deep as they were. No. I I know that there are a lot of people that know a lot more than me in relation to Jada and Tupac, but from this book, the way that she describes their relationship, and I know I'm just reading her words, so I'm a little bit biased based off of the information I'm taking in from this. It is so incredibly monumental that she met Tupac when he was in the 10th grade, and she was really like poor. He was a lot more poor than her, so she felt kind of like a maternal instinct to like really try to help him out and to do what she could to like really take care of him. And she really just cared for him as a friend. That's just the way that I kind of took it. Was they met when they were so young. I met one of my best friends, my ex-best friends, when I was in the 9th grade, and that relationship meant so much to me. And if we had grown into adulthood and like seeing each other's success, that would be incredibly impactful to me. Can you imagine, like, there was nobody else in the world that would have probably known what she was going through, or known, like, I don't know, her hometown struggle with her, along with her fame struggle. After she describes her childhood, she talks about like the hustle of being in Baltimore. She was a part-time worker, she was a part-time actor model, and then she was also a part-time drug dealer, which she talks about now in interviews, but I don't think that she had really that much before because I feel like I'm seeing a lot more content about her talking about her being a drug dealer, which is wild. Her first professional gig as an actor and model was as a runaway slave. A runaway slave in a PBS special about like Harriet Tubman, and she got paid $6,000 for that. I'm sorry.
Looking back at it, I think that was combined with her drug money at the time.
We like see a lot about her hustle. Honestly, there were some things that I didn't really understand about her talking about how Baltimore was like a city, like kind of not overrun, but it was very prevalent, the roles that organized crime played in Baltimore, and I thought that was really fascinating. And I also think it's really fascinating because she details it so well. But she was a drug dealer like in her teens, and like wasn't a drug dealer after that. But she details it like she did it like 5 years ago. There's a lot about her and her drug dealing days. Her running around in Baltimore, there's a lot of trauma, associated to her job as a drug dealer, because she did get caught up, I guess, as she notes, set up, I think twice, and she had a gun pulled on her. I think it was 2 times, but there was a one time where she nearly died. But the reason that somebody didn't kill her was because she said, "Oh, you're too pretty," which is like, and she said that was the first time I ever believed it, which is crazy. Which is also crazy because she's like 5 foot, dude. She's my height. She's little. Being a little drug dealer is insane. I feel scared to just walk among the streets. Walking among the streets with like cocaine is not realistic for me at all at my size. She gets out of Baltimore. College, she initially auditioned for Juilliard. They rejected her, and one of her friends signs her up for like this Northern California art school. And she like goes ahead and like starts doing that. She decides that school is not for her, and she was going to set out for California. Previous to that, Pac had already started in California and was like making his name and stuff. So yeah, and then she goes to Hollywood. When she starts off in Hollywood, she describes the like scene. I hate the way that I say things sometimes. She describes the scene as like hopeful because Black content was booming. Here in the book it says, from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, A Different World, Family Matters, In Living Color, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, Living Single, and Martin. Basically, there was a lot of Black shows, Black filmmakers, Black actors. There was a lot of opportunity for her. I think about that in relation to Oprah as well. Oprah, like, really, her career was right place, right time. Because you could see it a place that at a time, like, people like Oprah just wouldn't exist for the climate that it was in. You know what I mean? She starts working. She gets like 3 different jobs on top of like becoming an actress. In Hollywood, in anything, success really kind of does equal to people, you know? One of her friends starts dating Keenan Wayans and gets herself, I guess, invited to a party. And she talks him up, and is like, "Yo, you should make me one of your fly girls for real. You really should." Like badgering him and like just have a hang. But you get it because it's like, I didn't come out here for nothing. I'm going to make my connections. She basically networks her way into getting a name from an agent and like looks up the agent in like a phone book and uses his name to be like, yeah, whenever Keenan Wayans just like mentioned you or whatever. She gets an agent to have a meeting with her, and she has an agent, which is, I think, her first job is in Mo's world, which is interesting. So she starts going out and like getting real gigs. She first meets Will when she's at an audition for Fresh Prince. I think it was just like a guest role or like a tiny little thing, it's nothing major. And she sees him, he goes, "What's up?" She just says, "What's up?" And then she said, "I didn't give him the time of day." Annoyed by him from the start. Like, was not really interested in him from the start. But when she starts getting some success, she, of course, goes like, she struggles with the success, struggles with the fame. She has her first ever panic attack when she's just kind of casually talking to a friend, realizes through like talks with her mother and I guess exploration of like what the heck was that she has had some like PTSD from a lot of the violence and things that she's gone through as a child, of course. Pretty sure that from there that's when she gets on medication. So she's making her like way in LA. This event is not exactly chronological, but at some point she does get like a reoccurring role on a different world. I don't know exactly when that is. I wish I had written it down, but I didn't. Her and Will start to become friends, and for like the first time, it's like on page like 100 and something, deep into the book, she says like, you know what, Will was kind of captivating for real. And like on a phone call one time, her mom's like, "Who the heck is that?" And she's like, "It's Will." And her mom's like, "You should hang up, he's married." Before she went on medication, she like was dating around a little bit, and she mentions how she put sex on like a really high pedestal. But I think like after she went on medication for like a brief stint, like stopped dating. But there was a time where she started dating this guy who was very intimidated by her relationship with Tupac, which I think was really interesting. And he was a really toxic person. One of the things that he wanted to do for her was finish like some of her house renovation, and essentially offered to pay $700,000 in order to finish getting her house renovated. Which is like, if you have been dating somebody for less than 3 months and they offer to pay $700,000, that's actually a red flag. Like, there's no, I was gonna say like, oh, maybe that could be, no, that's a red flag. Get out of there. That's scary. But I will say that like her relationship with Pac is kind of weird, because she says like, "Oh, me and Pac were just friends. There was a time where we tried to be romantic just to like see what happened, because I'm a girl, he's a boy, whatever." But it never worked out. And then she mentions that Pac just proposes to her in jail. I'm pretty sure it was out of like a "you're the only one I have" type thing, like I appreciate you, I love you deeply type of a thing, confusion. But it's weird because it's like, you go so hard for the idea that you never felt anything romantic, and then it's like, oh, yeah, like he proposed to me. Nothing ever like, oh, he complimented me this day, oh, he told me I was beautiful. Like, I don't know, like, there are just some moments where it's like, I feel like we're missing so many details. And it's really hard because there's so many things that I felt that she was describing with Pac and their relationship that were like, I wish we had a different perspective on this, but we can't get it anymore. Will gets divorced, and the minute that he gets divorced, he calls up Jada and he's like, "Who you seeing?" She's like, "Nobody." And he's like, "Well, you seeing me." So then they just start dating. And like I said, she doesn't really like Will in the beginning. Will's just kind of this person who's just in Hollywood, and I know she said like, he's just too cheery for me. Like, I didn't really like his energy. But when I was getting to know him, he had this way of looking at the world, and I was falling in love with him because his perspective was anyone like I had never met, and I thought that was really beautiful and endearing. And she says, Will was a guy who would be comfortable in the hood or at the White House and everywhere in between. He had the ability to spread his arms wide and promise you that the world was his oyster, and he was going to give you all the pearls it had to offer. That like took my breath away a little bit. The world was his oyster, and he was going to give you all the pearls it had to offer. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful sentiment. The beginning of the relationship is kind of beautiful, but fairly quickly into it, she has these jealousy issues because at this point, he's divorced from Cherie and has a son, and she kind of has to deal with like the second wife jealousy and like the stepmom type jealousy. And she's like, "Why the heck are you calling your baby mama's your baby mama's mama. Like, why the heck are you talking to them? And he's like, well, that's my son's grandparent. So, and honestly, you could really see how the beginning of like that toxic foundation is laid, because I can't even begin to think of the pressures and the insecurities of what it takes to be a second wife to somebody who you love, who was like a small child with the person that they broke it off with. Tupac and her get into a fight that seemingly Jada describes as like, well, he thought I was getting all Hollywood. I thought I like didn't really recognize who he was. And this was after a lot. Like, this was after he had been shot, went to jail, got out of jail, kind of realized like he has very like few authentic people near him, and they just had like this moment where they just had a lot of turmoil, and basically had an argument that essentially ended their friendship. And it was interesting because she described this as, this was nothing new to us, like we just had this explosive argument, but we always knew that we had love for each other. But it's like that was never described in the book previously. There was never really a moment where she had said like, oh, Pac and I just went through this thing, but like we ended up talking. It's always, she always had admiration for him. They always had a brother sisterly bond, and like always stuck by each other's side. And just to hear like, oh, just to read, oh, we just got into this one argument and then we never spoke again. It takes on an emotional roller coaster, because directly after that, Tupac gets shot, gets put in a coma, and then passes away a year after their last conversation. And I really do see why she struggles so much emotionally with this loss, because I can't imagine. I cannot imagine having a friend for that long that has seen you rise to such fame that you have a falling out with, and then they die, and then you can't like make amends. But I do understand, like, there are a lot of people being like, listen, you don't, like, why are you constantly bringing him up? But also it's weird because she's like, well, we had these like arguments every once in a while, but you like didn't touch on that in the book really. You just touched on it when you had a falling out. So it's kind of odd, but I'm no one to criticize or judge that relationship. It's her relationship. She writes about it the way that she feels it, and that's just her experience, okay? Also, it's fascinating because she said, Puck had been a mirror, a reflection of my best self, a tether. My heart felt ravaged like a million stabbings every second. My worst fear had come true. It's weird because she said that like directly after she heard that he passed away. It's directly, Puck had been a mirror, a reflection of my best self. I know that I really don't want to jump on the hate train of Jada talking about Tupac, but it's also kind of odd that you, like, after your friend passing away, you'd be like, he's a mirror of me. That's just a little bit odd. Like I said, she's having experience. That's just the way that she needs to mourn it. But I just can't help but react in a way that is just kind of weird. In between the book, she has these little, like, they feel a little bit preachy. Like, they're kind of just, they feel journal entry-esque, but they get a little preachy. At a certain point, I stopped reading them because I was like, I don't feel like being preached to. I feel like this just takes away the book's authenticity because you're out here like, but just they feel preachy. I don't know. Jada gets pregnant with Jaden, and essentially she has like all of these fears, being like, I don't know. Her mom, in her old school like way, just says you need to marry him. You can see why or how she got pressured into marrying Will, especially because this was in the 90s. It's not like now where you don't immediately think like, well, we gotta get married. This is like, she felt pressured, and this was Hollywood, and I don't know. I'm not excusing this to be like, well, you can see why they have like this bad marriage for life now, but children just really complicate everything when you have them with a partner that you're not like committed to already. It like kind of forces you to have that commitment, because like no matter what, a child is forever. So you can see why people would naturally like lean into the marital aspect. I think Jada would agree with this. I don't think they should have got married, but like it was the circumstances of what the heck happened. So also, whenever she has Jaden, Will is like, we gotta name him after you. And so hence comes Jaden from Jada. Why have I never examined that before? I have never sat and thought to myself, like, oh, you know what? Jada and Jade. Oh my god, she named him after her. I've never thought. And the whole Will and Willow, maybe that crossed my mind. It's a little bit more obvious, but the whole Jada and Jada, never. She gets into the last part of her book, which is kind of just describing like the very vague problems that her and Will have, because she's saying like, oh, he just said, I would say like, we need to spend more time together, and he would say, not right now, because he had such great aspirations, because he was Will Smith, you know. Will Smith is one of the greatest, most larger than life black actors of our generation, so he probably felt that pressure. But with that pressure comes taking away your interpersonal relationships and time from that. Jada tells about her frustration of feeling like neglected, of not really feeling like seen or heard or loved. But she does not really get into it, because she just says like, oh, he would always say like, we'll get to it later, we'll get to whatever later. And then she says, oh, and we decided to separate in 2016. Oh, and then after that, we had the entanglement. And by the way, I called it entanglement because it's not an affair. It's just an entanglement, because affair means secrets, and that wasn't a secret. Like, she gets very defensive about the things that the public finds out about her, and she goes into why the public misunderstood. But it's like the public misunderstood because we didn't know that y'all had this little agreement. She really just keeps it at the surface, and then lightly glosses over like, oh, this, like, yeah, just by the way, he wasn't my son's best friend. And she says best friend. He was his friend though. Like, that, you said that on Red Table Talk. You did. And then she was talking about how Will she was talking about how Will basically threw her under the red table because they were talking about their issues, and from her perspective, she thought that he had made it seem like it was some sort of surprise when he knows that it wasn't. But it's like, he was mad at you. He said, I was done with you, but she doesn't mention that in the book. The thing is that, like, from our view, sure, maybe it looks weird because Will is acting like he didn't know, but at the end of the day, we all knew what the heck was going on. But Will was like done with you, and you adding on this entanglement makes it seem like, okay, so that only makes sense as to why he's done with you, on top of other things. I think she's also upset because she's like, we had agreed to separate, and that's what we were doing, and we had told each other what we were doing, but the world made it seem like I was hiding this from Will. No, if Will had come out with his own little entanglement, then maybe it would be a little bit more fair. But it's not. And y'all should have talked about that beforehand. Jada doesn't like say many things directly. Like, I feel like she really skirts by any responsibility. Like, she does admit that she did kind of bring it on herself. She doesn't completely just say, this is out of nowhere, y'all don't know me, but she has similar wording. It's very similar. She addresses the whole slap heard across the world thing, and she calls it the holy slap, because that taught holy lessons. She said that she was taken off guard by Chris saying that, because they already had recent beef with him kind of like poking fun at her in the past, and that he had already asked her out. It's just weird. The whole thing is just weird. She didn't really bring up any new information except for the fact that they've been separated for 7 years, and the fact that they're not separate, like they're not getting a divorce, is kind of crazy. I guess they're just doing them, and that's, I don't know. Some people are like, take us out the group chat. I'm like fine with being in the group chat. I love the family tea. Wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever time of day it is, I hope you have a good morning, afternoon, or night.